Sometimes, the person who stands beside you is the one you should fear the most. Julian Carter was the kind of detective people looked up to. Calm under pressure, sharp with evidence, and respected throughout the River Grove Police Department. At 38, with broad shoulders and a gaze that could cut through lies in seconds, Julian had built his reputation not through talk, but through action. He wasn't just a good cop. He was the cop. The one you called when everything else had gone to hell. But no one ever imagined that the real threat wouldn't come from the streets, but from right beside him. For nearly 5 years, his patrol partner was Detective Sierra Monroe. 35 years old, light-skinned, composed, and terrifyingly observant. To the department, they were a dream team. 2 seasoned professionals who could clear a case faster than most departments could assign one. Sierra always stayed just behind Julian, always quiet, always calculated. And maybe that's what made it so easy to miss. Because while Julian saw her as a partner, Sierra saw him as something much more. Julian was married to his college sweetheart, Tasha Carter, a beautiful, ambitious woman who had loved him through the academy, the late shifts, the long nights, and the kids. They had built a life together in a modest brick house on the south side of River Grove. But lately, that life had grown cold. The long hours at work turned into longer silences at home. Conversations became arguments. Connection became absence. And slowly, without anyone realizing, the marriage began to hollow out. But Sierra noticed. Oh, she noticed everything. She knew when Julian started working late. She memorized the way his voice shifted when he mentioned Tasha. She knew which days he came in with tired eyes and which mornings he didn't wear his wedding ring. She watched and she waited. And behind those quiet nods and professional smiles, Sierra Monroe was falling deeper into a fantasy of her own making. She had been in love with Julian Carter for years. Not in the way you fall in love with someone you might have a chance with. No, this was different. This was darker. She had constructed a whole life in her mind. One where she was his partner in more ways than just work. One where the wife, the kids, the real world, didn't exist. Or worse, could be removed. Every day in that squad car, she savored the smallest moments. His laugh, the way he rubbed his temples when exhausted, the smell of his cologne after a long day. To Julian, it was routine. But to Sierra, it was the story of a love that no one else could see. And she hated Tasha for it. She hated how Tasha didn't seem to get him anymore. How she scolded him, accused him, raised her voice in frustration. Sierra called it ungrateful. She told herself, if I had what she had, I would cherish it. I would never let him feel alone. I would never make him sleep on the couch. In her mind, Tasha wasn't just a wife. She was an obstacle. And obstacles? Sierra had spent her whole career learning how to remove them. So while the rest of the department saw 2 hardworking cops closing cases together, Sierra Monroe was slowly writing a story in her head where she was the heroine and Tasha Carter was the villain. And no one, not Julian, not Tasha, not their children, had any idea that this story wasn't just unfolding in secret. It was about to turn deadly. It didn't happen overnight. Marriages don't collapse all at once. They erode, slowly, quietly, like water slipping through a crack in the foundation. And in the Carter household, the silence had grown louder than any scream. Tasha Carter had always been the center of their family, organized, loving, grounded. But she wasn't naive. She could feel her husband slipping away from her. The man who once kissed her forehead every morning now barely looked her in the eyes. He came home late, offered half-hearted excuses, and when she tried to talk, he shut down. The dinner she used to make with care now sat cold on the stove. Their conversations turned into strained nods. The air between them was thick with tension, not anger, but something more painful, indifference. And in that void, Tasha could sense someone else. It wasn't just her imagination. It wasn't jealousy. It was Sierra Monroe. Tasha had heard the name too many times. Felt the way Julian's face softened when he mentioned her. Watched his phone light up at odd hours. Saw how quickly he replied. How often he smiled at the screen. Smiles that hadn't graced their kitchen in months. She didn't need proof. She felt it. One night, As the rain tapped lightly on the kitchen window and their children played upstairs, the silence finally cracked. Tasha stood in front of Julian, arms folded tightly, voice shaking, not from rage, but from months of buried pain. "Are you in love with her?" she asked quietly. Julian didn't answer. He didn't shout. He didn't deny it. He just looked at the floor, guilty, defeated, hollow. And that silence, it cut deeper than any confession ever could. Tasha's voice trembled as she tried again. "Do you talk to her about me? About us?" Still nothing. She had spent over a decade building a life with this man, giving him children, supporting his career, loving him through every storm. And now, she was invisible. "Julian," she whispered, "she's not just your partner. I can see it. She's replacing me, piece by piece." He stepped back, grabbed his keys without a word, and left. The front door closed with a finality that sounded like goodbye. Tasha stood frozen in the kitchen, her arms shaking, her eyes burning with tears she refused to let fall. Above her, the muffled sound of cartoons played, unaware of the world falling apart downstairs. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just stood there, holding the weight of a marriage she could no longer carry alone. Outside, Julian sat in the driveway, his breath fogging up the windshield. He wasn't thinking about the woman he just walked away from. He was thinking about Sierra, because in that moment, she felt like the only person who understood him. And sure enough, his phone buzzed, her name glowing on the screen, like she had been waiting for the door to close behind him. He didn't reply. Not yet. But he didn't go back inside either. That night, Julian Carter made a choice. Not with words, not with action, but with absence. And in a modest apartment, just a few blocks away, Sierra Monroe was watching the clock, waiting, smiling, believing, with every fiber of her twisted heart, that fate was finally beginning to move in her favor. You think obsession is loud, but it's not. It's silent, calculated, patient. And behind the locked door of apartment 2B, Sierra Monroe wasn't just obsessing. She was preparing. From the outside, her place looked ordinary. A worn brick building on the east side of River Grove, chipped paint on the railing. Nothing remarkable. But step inside, and everything changed. Her bedroom had become a shrine. Not to God, not to family, to Julian Carter. One entire wall was covered, corner to corner, with photographs of him. Some were official department snapshots. Others weren't. Sierra had taken them herself. Through the windshield of her car. At precinct barbecues. At gas stations. Even one through the window of Julian's own home. Every photo was labeled. Dates, times, locations, what he was wearing, who he was with, and, most disturbingly, what kind of mood he seemed to be in. Tired but tender. Irritated after Tasha call. Smiled when I brought coffee. It wasn't love. It was surveillance. Beside the collage was a corkboard, and in the very center of it was a photo of Tasha Carter, Julian's wife. The face had been slashed out with a red marker. The kind of cross that didn't just mark a picture, it erased a person. Torn out journal pages surrounded it. Each entry a feverish blend of longing and resentment, like a romance novel bleeding into a crime scene. In one entry, Sierra had written, "He comes alive when he talks to me." She doesn't see that. She doesn't deserve him. I do. Another entry. If she was gone, he'd see me. He'd finally be free. We'd finally begin. Over and over again, she practiced signing her name as Mrs. Sierra Carter, scribbled like a teenager, but with the intensity of someone slowly slipping into delusion. And that was the most terrifying part. Sierra truly believed this was destiny. Not fantasy, not infatuation, but fate. She had kept an old phone too, disconnected from service, but still loaded with voicemail recordings of Julian. Some were work-related messages, some were personal. Others she had recorded without his knowledge. Quiet moments. His voice in the squad car. Him talking on the phone to Tasha. Even one of him laughing with his son in the background. She would lie in bed some nights, letting those voicemails play on a loop, the glow of his smile still lingering behind her eyes. She wore his cologne, bought it after once leaning close in the car and catching a scent off his neck. She sprayed it on her sheets. Her entire world was built around a man who didn't know he was being stalked by someone who shared his patrol car. And when Tasha confronted Julian that night, Sierra knew. She didn't need to be told. She felt it in her bones. Because in Sierra's mind, the final obstacle had begun to crack, and she would not wait much longer. There's a moment, and a plan becomes something irreversible. It was late, after midnight, the kind of hour where the world grows still and every CR. Inside the Carter home, the atmosphere was heavy, suffocating. Upstairs, the children were asleep, tucked into beds still warm from bedtime stories. Boo! Tasha Carter sat alone at the kitchen table, eyes red, jaw tight. She had just gone through Julian's phone. She hadn't meant to. She didn't want to be that woman. But something inside her, a voice, a pull, a dread, told her to look. And there it was. A message from Sierra Monroe. You deserve happiness. She doesn't give you that. Just one sentence. But it shattered everything. Tasha didn't cry. She didn't scream. She simply set the phone down and waited. When Julian walked into the kitchen a few minutes later, coffee mug in hand, she didn't say hello. She didn't accuse him. She just looked at him, dead in the eye. And he knew. He tried to explain, called it a misunderstanding. Said Sierra was emotional. Said it didn't mean anything. But Tasha wasn't buying it anymore. She stood tall, arms folded, voice steady, and gave him a warning. She's not stable. She's in love with you. And if you don't do something about it, I will. It was the last thing she ever said to him. Hours later, while the children slept upstairs and the house lay draped in shadows, a figure approached the front door. Dressed in all black, gloved, silent. It wasn't a break-in. It was a walk-in. Because the woman who entered that home had a key. A copy made months ago, back when Julian had once trusted her to water the plants while he was away at a training seminar. He never asked for it back, and Sierra Monroe had kept it, waiting. Tonight, it wasn't a souvenir. It was a weapon. She moved like someone who had rehearsed it. Black shirt, black pants, tactical boots, her service weapon loaded and tucked close. She was methodical, heart pounding, but hands steady. This wasn't spur of the moment. This was premeditated. Inside the house, Tasha stirred in bed. Something didn't feel right. A faint creak downstairs, the kind that wasn't the fridge or the pipes. No, this was weight on wood. Footsteps. She sat up, heart racing, eyes adjusting to the dark. She reached for her phone, but she never got the chance to dial. As she stepped into the hallway, the shape emerged at the foot of the stairs. Just a shadow, and then, pop, a single, suppressed gunshot. Not loud, but final. Tasha's body crumpled where she stood, eyes still open. Her phone slipped from her hand, screen cracked on impact. Blood pooled slowly beneath her, seeping into the hardwood like ink into paper. The children upstairs kept sleeping. The house remained undisturbed. Nothing stolen, nothing broken, no signs of forced entry, no alarms triggered. Just one woman gone, and the person who took her walked out the front door just as easily as she walked in. Rain began to fall, soft, steady, washing away what little evidence there might have been. Except for one thing. Motive. This wasn't random. This wasn't a burglary. This was personal. This was the cold-blooded erasure of a woman who stood in the way of another's delusion. Tasha Carter was a wife, a mother, a protector. And now she was gone because someone mistook obsession for love. And the world around them had no idea what had just been set in motion. Grief makes you vulnerable. And for some, it makes you a target. The morning after Tasha Carter was found murdered, River Grove awoke to the sound of sirens and the buzz of breaking news. Crime scene tape fluttered outside the modest home on Hickory Lane. Neighbors whispered. Officers stood with heavy hearts. And inside a black body bag, the woman who held that family together was gone. Julian Carter arrived at the scene still in uniform. He hadn't even zipped his jacket. The call had been vague. An officer down at his own address. He ran past the tape. No one stopped him. They didn't have to. He was walking into a nightmare. And then he saw her, Tasha, lying beneath a tarp on the steps of their home. Her face pale, her body still. A single bullet to the head. No sign of struggle. No robbery. No forced entry. Just gone. Julian collapsed to his knees on the wet pavement. And in that moment, the man who could keep calm in the face of any criminal, who could piece together a crime scene in seconds, came completely undone. And then she appeared. Sierra Monroe. She knelt beside him, hand on his back, whispering soft nothings as if she were soothing a child. Her touch was gentle, her eyes glassy. Too perfect, too ready. She didn't ask what happened. She didn't have to. She already knew. In the weeks that followed, Sierra became a fixture inside the Carter home. She arrived the next day with a covered casserole and a bag of groceries. She said she just wanted to help. But help has boundaries. Sierra crossed all of them. She swept the kitchen, picked up toys, folded the kids' laundry. At first, Julian said nothing. He was too numb to object, too hollow to push back. And then she started staying late. Said she didn't want him to be alone. Offered to sleep on the couch. Brought her own pillow and blanket. Then a toothbrush. Then a pair of shoes left near the front door. And before Julian even realized what was happening, she was living there. His kids didn't protest. In their grief, they clung to routine, to warm meals and bedtime stories. Sierra played the role perfectly. Her voice had the same softness Tasha once had. She even made sandwiches the same way. But Julian began to notice. One afternoon, walking through the hallway, something stopped him in his tracks. A smell. Tasha's perfume. The same floral scent she wore every day. But it wasn't Tasha. It was Sierra. He stared at her from the kitchen doorway, his chest tightening. She looked up and smiled faintly, as if nothing was wrong, as if she didn't notice how his entire body tensed. But her eyes? They watched him too closely. And then came the moment that tore him open. His daughter, half asleep on the couch, curled into Sierra's lap and whispered, "Mommy, can I have some water?" Sierra didn't correct her. She stroked the girl's hair, nodded, and stood to fetch the glass like she had always belonged there. Julian stood frozen in the hallway. His heart collapsed into the hollow space that grief had carved inside him. He didn't say a word. He couldn't. Behind him, Sierra smiled softly. And in her mind, everything was falling into place. Tasha was gone, and Sierra Monroe was now inside the home, inside the family, inside the life she believed she was meant to have. But what she didn't know was that Julian Carter was starting to wake up. At first, it was just a feeling, a chill in the air that had nothing to do with weather. Julian Carter had always trusted his instincts. They'd save his life more times than he could count. But grief, real grief, clouds everything. It blurs your vision, dulls your gut, makes you second-guess what should feel obvious. Until it doesn't. One night, Julian sat alone in the basement, his sanctuary untouched by Sierra's helpful hands. The kids were asleep, the house quiet, and for the first time in weeks, his mind stopped spinning long enough for clarity to creep in. He played back Tasha's last voicemail. Her voice was tired, shaky, guarded, not angry, afraid. He hadn't heard it the first dozen times, but now it chilled him to the bone. Julian pulled out his phone, opened his call logs, messages, and there she was, Sierra Monroe. Dozens of late-night texts, calls at strange hours, conversations that overlapped with arguments he had at home. One message stood out, dated just 2 days before Tasha's murder. "You deserve peace. Real peace. Not the kind you fake at home." His hands trembled. He remembered Tasha saying she felt watched. He had dismissed her, told her she was imagining things. But now he wasn't so sure. He opened the folder marked Neighborhood Cameras on his laptop, footage he collected from surrounding homes just in case. Most clips were uneventful. Rain, squirrels, passing cars. But one timestamp grabbed his attention. 2:16 a.m., the night Tasha was murdered. The footage came from across the street. It showed Julian's porch, dimly lit, wet pavement, and then movement. A hooded figure, all black, confident, deliberate, moving like they knew the terrain. Julian leaned in. The video was grainy, warped from the rain. But then his breath caught in his throat. The boots. Thick-soled, tactical, with a distinct scuff on the left heel. Sierra's boots. He had seen them on stakeouts, under desks, propped on dashboards during long shifts. He knew those boots. He paused the frame, stared at the screen. His lungs tightened. His thoughts raced. And suddenly, Every strange moment, every small detail clicked into place. The perfume, the toothbrush, the message, the comfort. She hadn't just stepped into his home. She had eliminated what stood in her way. Julian Carter, once blind with sorrow, now saw with painful clarity. Tasha wasn't taken by fate. She was taken by the woman sitting just a floor above him. And that woman was sleeping under his roof, with his children, wearing his wife's scent. He had no proof that would hold in court. Not yet. But he didn't need a jury to tell him what he already knew deep in his soul. Sierra Monroe murdered Tasha Carter. And now, he was going to prove it. The hallway outside Sierra Monroe's apartment was dim. Flickering light. Silent. Stale air that held its breath like it knew what was about to happen. Julian Carter stood at her door, jaw locked, heart pounding. Not from grief this time, but from rage. Cold, focused, righteous rage. 3 hard knocks. Loud. Sharp. Final. No answer. He didn't wait. The door burst open. Crack. Slamming against the inside wall as Sierra jumped from the couch. A wine glass slipping from her hand and shattering across the floor. She stood frozen. Barefoot. Eyes wide. Julian stepped in, slammed the door shut behind him, and moved fast, closing the space between them like a man possessed. She stammered his name, tried to read his face. But there was no warmth left. No sympathy. No confusion. Just the steady storm of a man who finally saw the truth. Her lips trembled. Her eyes filled with tears, but they were hollow. Performed. She whispered, "Julian, please. I didn't mean for." "Sit down," he growled. She didn't. She backed away. He didn't follow. He just watched her, the same way a hunter watches a wounded animal before the final shot. Her eyes flicked, barely, to the drawer by the armchair. He noticed. That's where the weapon was. Noted. Filed. Logged. Because Julian was no longer grieving. He was investigating. Then, she broke. Tears. Rambling. Desperate. "I loved you. I waited for you. She never deserved you. I was just trying to set you free. Don't you see that? You were in a cage, Julian." She took a step closer. Her hand grazed his sleeve. "I would have made you happy." Julian didn't blink. Didn't move. Didn't say a word. He had already seen it all. The ring footage, the cloud backups, the photo of Tasha through the window just minutes before the shot. The copied house key. The boots. The journal. The delusion. And the lie Sierra had wrapped herself in like a blanket of madness. She stepped back. Eyes frantic now. Chest rising faster. Then she lunged. Her hand gripped the drawer handle. But Julian was faster. His weapon was drawn in a heartbeat. Arm locked, voice low and lethal. "Don't." The room froze. She did too, her hand still on the drawer. His gun trained dead center on the woman who had killed his wife and walked into his home like a savior. Their eyes met, one filled with panic, the other pure, righteous fury. Sierra's hands rose slowly, fingers trembling. This was it. The mask shattered. The truth laid bare. The delusion dead. Julian stepped forward, cuffed her himself. Her wrists twisted behind her back, already bruising. She didn't resist. She didn't beg, because deep down, she knew it was over. The squad car ride was silent. Sierra sat in the back, flanked by 2 officers. Behind the glass, her face was unreadable. No tears, no remorse, no shame, just silence. The flashing red and blue lights lit up her reflection in the window, painting her skin in alternating pulses of justice. She didn't speak. She didn't have to, because now, the evidence spoke for her, and it screamed louder than any lie she could ever invent. River Grove, Georgia had never seen a trial like this. The courthouse steps were packed. Journalists, bloggers, true crime addicts, grieving neighbors. Microphones wave in the air like flags. Cameras rolled without blinking. Inside, the tension was thick, the air stiff with anticipation. And at the center of it all, Sierra Monroe. She walked in shackled, wearing a muted gray suit, hands cuffed until the judge signaled otherwise. Her posture was straight, her expression unreadable. Gone was the soft-spoken officer. Gone was the grieving friend. What stood in her place was a woman accused of murdering her partner's wife and trying to replace her. The prosecution wasted no time. They presented the digital evidence first: texts, call logs, voicemails. Sierra's messages to Julian. You deserve peace. She's keeping you trapped. I see you. I always have. Then came a bombshell. A photograph taken through a window. Tasha Carter in her pajamas, minutes before the murder. Timestamp, 2:11 a.m. Next, the key. An exact match to Julian's spare. Traced to a locksmith Sierra had visited 3 weeks before the murder. The receipt was pulled from her deleted email folder. Irrefutable, but it was the journal that made the courtroom fall silent. Pulled from her apartment with gloved hands, the pages were read aloud, word by word. Sierra had written about Tasha dozens of times. He'll never see me as long as she's breathing. When she's gone, he'll know where he belongs. Delusion inked in looping handwriting. Love twisted into motive. When the defense tried to claim mental instability, emotional stress, trauma, they were met with the cold, calculated timeline the prosecution had already built. Sierra hadn't snapped. She had planned. She had stalked. She had executed. And the jury? It didn't take long. For hours. Guilty. On all counts. First-degree murder. Unlawful entry. Abuse of power under color of authority. Sierra didn't flinch. She didn't cry. Just blinked. Like she'd expected it all along. Sentencing came a week later. The gallery was packed again. Julian Carter sat near the back. Arms folded. Face carved from stone. He hadn't said a word publicly. Not to reporters. Not even in court. But today he was here. When asked if she had anything to say before sentencing, Sierra turned to him, and with a trembling smile, one that never reached her eyes, she whispered, I just wanted to make you happy. Julian didn't move, didn't blink, didn't give her anything, not even a final look. The judge's voice rang through the chamber like thunder. Life in prison, without the possibility of parole. The cuffs were placed back around Sierra's wrists. The door closed behind her with a steel finality. And just like that, the woman who tried to rewrite someone else's life with a bullet and a lie was gone. A year passed. The Carter home was quieter now, not heavy with grief, but calmer, softer. Julian had learned to breathe again. He took the kids to school, made lunches, tucked them in, read stories. The photos on the walls had changed. More of the kids. One of Tasha, laughing beside a birthday cake, frozen in time. Her toothbrush still sat in the cup. Her shoes still by the door. The children insisted. And Julian? He honored it. He never forgot. One evening, after the kids had gone to bed, Julian stood by the back door, tea in hand, eyes on the trees, swaying in the moonlight. No sirens, no screams, just peace. And then the reading lamp in the corner flickered. Just once, then stayed on. Its soft glow bathed Tasha's photo in golden light. Her smile shimmered in the frame. Julian didn't notice. He turned, walked inside, and gently closed the door behind him, ready for tomorrow. And in that quiet house, something lingered. Not fear, not pain, but love. Changed, scarred, but still here. Because though Sierra Monroe tried to steal a family, she failed to destroy it. And in that, Tasha Carter won.